All right. If you regularly smoke weed, particularly in the form of dab carts, dab pens, you're in high school and you're ripping the Benjamin on a regular basis, you're going to want to pay attention to today's video as we break down this article, this bombshell article that was just released by the New York Times. How dirty is your weed? A joint investigation finds high levels of pesticides contained within these products. Now, before we break this down, I want to tell you a little bit about myself because this video really hits home for me. I struggled with cannabis addiction for several years of my life, about 9 years of my life. And right around the time I quit was when a brand, I'll put that in air quotations, was out called Dank Vape Carts. And these were the definition of hot dog water carts, pesticide water carts. And I was consuming those. And that was the brand that was linked to a lot of the people that died right just before COVID. There was 63 people that died due to these carts being cut with vitamin E acetate. And that vitamin E clogged up their lungs, led to lung failure, and then ultimately death. And sadly, had I kept consuming those cartridges, there's a chance I could have been one of those people. I actually found myself in an urgent care at one point with breathing problems, and they diagnosed me with pneumonia. But later I learned what the true cause of the issues were. So, really scary stuff. And I've been making videos for years trying to warn people about the dangers of this. And just now, I'm starting to feel like there's a little bit of validity being given to what I've been saying. Now, as we go through this article, I'm going to try and give you guys some pointers along the way and clarify some things because my company is currently looking into doing a bunch of testing on products that are circulating around the high schools here in New York State. So I do have some insight when it comes to this topic and testing and what exactly they're looking at, the good and the bad sides of it. All right. So what's this article all about? So basically, the LA Times teamed up with Weed Week, which is a newsletter, and they went around and they purchased 42 products, okay, from various legal products within the state of California. Now, what they found was 25 of these products had concentrations of pesticides above either state allowed levels or current federal standards for tobacco. So they used tobacco as the benchmark when it comes to the pesticide testing and stuff like that. Now, they say the contaminants contained inside these cartridges or dab pens, the chemicals have been linked to cancer, liver failure, thyroid disease, genetic and neurological harm to users and unborn children, which is fascinating, right? Because a lot of people, in my opinion, like myself, are out there suffering from really messed up symptoms, fatigue, stomach problems. I had all these vision issues, blurry vision, kind of linked to maybe psychotic symptoms when it came to visual disturbances. All of this stuff happened right around the time I was starting to consume these. In my case, they were black market cartridges. But I talk to people every day in the high schools and in my career, helping people quit who are getting all these weird symptoms. And it looks like a lot of these things could potentially be linked back to these pesticides, to these chemicals. And I think this makes it particularly confusing because I think you got a lot of people going into the hospital or doctor's offices with symptoms that don't make any sense at all. And they're like, yeah, I smoke weed. And the physician looks at them like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Weed wouldn't cause X, Y, and Z problems. But I don't think we're taking into consideration the quality and the lack of regulation that's going on with cannabis right now in regard to what that person is actually consuming. Now, something that I do want to note, though, before we talk about some of the brands and some of the testing on this, when you're testing a product, so like they tested the Stizzy brand, I don't know how many grams of the specific lot and batch number of the Stizzy cart that they tested, because really, in order to get an accurate test for that lot or batch number, you should have, I think it's about 14 to 15 grams of product to be testing. To me, it sounds like they just bought, several dozen different type of carts. So they bought one of each brand and then just tested that individual cart. And then it sounds like they're kind of making a blanket statement regarding that that whole brand. And I don't know, as someone who helps people quit weed, as someone who says these things are terrible for you, I don't know that that's accurate to do that, because really you should have, 14 grams of the same product, the same batch number, and the same lot number before you're making a statement saying that, this brand, this product contained really high levels of pesticides, because maybe it was just a fluke in the brand's defense. I don't think so at all, though. I don't think it was a fluke at all. I think a lot of these brands really do have major problems. So the article goes on to say most of the pesticides found were in low concentrations, but the risk with long-term use and repeated exposure, we don't know the health problems and the health complications that are going to come in the future. And that's the issue. So many people think, oh, like I've been smoking dank vapes for a month and I feel fine. And then they get really sick and they're like, oh, it couldn't have been the dank vape carts. It couldn't have been the stizzy cart. It couldn't have been that cart from the dispensary. I've been smoking it for a month and I've been fine. It's kind of like a cigarette, right? Every time you consume the drug, every time in this case you consume the pesticide, the damage builds up a little bit more and more and more each time you consume it. And then boom, one day you wake up and you have some major health complications. And that's exactly how this pesticide, I'll say poisoning, works. You get a little bit of damage each time you consume it. And then one day you wake up to possibly some major, very complicated, confusing health problems. Now, why would this happen? Like, why is this happening? So the article in the LA Times states that there's major gaps in regulation, leaving policing of the industry largely in the hands of the financial beholder to the companies whose products they test. Okay. They go on to say legislation to require independent fraud and accuracy checks has remained stalled in Sacramento for 2 years in backroom negotiations between industry players and regulators. So they're basically saying there's some shady stuff going on between politicians and the bigger players in the industry when it comes to quality control and regulations. So most of the people involved in the politics of this have remained silent, including California's Department of Cannabis Control. They have yet to propose new regulations. And the department's director, Nicole Elliott, declined to be interviewed on the extent of the pesticide threat. Now, why is this relevant? See, in California, I think they said they test for 66 pesticides, but this is really outdated and not up to speed with the pesticides that are being sprayed when it comes to testing, and the pesticides that actually can cause health complications and health problems. So, like, for example, the brand Stizzy was identified as having like a crazy amount higher of this one pesticide than the FDA allows. But in Stizzy's defense, they said, hey, California doesn't require testing for this specific pesticide. So we actually didn't do anything wrong. So I'm not blaming Stizzy. I'm not calling them out. They were identified in the article as having a pesticide that's beyond that of FDA regulations. But to Stizzy's point, they're saying, hey, California regulations don't call for this. So why are you blaming us? We didn't do anything wrong. Now, you could argue, shouldn't the brand do diligence to make sure that its consumer is consuming the safest product possible? And I'll tell you, I hate to say this, and this is just opinion. There's a lot of kids in high school consuming Stizzies, and I think a lot of them are black market here in New York. I don't think they're from the actual brand, but man, oh man, major, major health problems that they're running into, both mentally, physically, psychologically, all across the board. So they go on to talk more about this, and they talk to some of these employees that are involved apparently in the regulations. And basically, these employees who spoke out of they didn't reveal their identity. They said that there's a lack of willingness within the agency to take a hard line on pesticide contamination. Now, why would that be? One said she was schooled on the importance of not disrupting the market. It all comes down to money, right? Because the more regulations, the more it's going to cost these cannabis companies in pesticide procedures, and then they're not going to be able to get as much weed out to market, It's not going to be taxed at the rate it's being taxed because now less weed is getting out to market, and you kind of halt this boom in cannabis use, and it disrupts the money. It disrupts the money. It comes down to money, right? So this is terrifying. Reading something like this is actually terrifying, not shocking at all. And people don't get it. Like, per batch to test, you're talking minimally probably $800 to $1,000 per batch of testing for third-party testing and COAs on these products. Now, I want you to think about organic food, okay? Think about how much more expensive organic food is. This is kind of what we look at when we're talking maybe about organic cannabis without the use of pesticides, kind of like organic fruits and vegetables grown with less or without the use of pesticides. This gets significantly more expensive. Okay. So when people are like, why are these companies doing this? It's to cut costs so they can grow larger crops, so they can get more product to market. Why doesn't the government regulate that more aggressively? I think it's twofold. I think you have more dispensaries popping up than the government can keep up with. And secondfold, the government's getting the tax dollars from it. So it's a win-win. It's a win for the company making the cannabis. It's a win on the government collecting the tax dollars. It's a huge market, the LA Times reference, and the potential for profit, right? Now, they say the compounding to the issue is the lack of data on cannabis's long-term effects on health. And that's due to the federal government's classification of marijuana as dangerous as drugs, including heroin and LSD, which puts limitations on medical research. But I think that's going to be overturned somewhat soon. Now, the craziest thing about this, especially for a place like California or New York, where, we talk about small business and this and that, they're the people who are getting crushed by this, because a lot of the smaller businesses are trying to do diligence and do this the right way, and it's costing them tons of money. Well, the larger companies are just, spraying whatever pesticides they can, in this case, technically legally get away with. And it's a major problem for the smaller growers because they're immediately getting pushed out of the market because they're trying to do diligence, which is costing them more money, but they can't keep up with the guys pumping out the pesticide carts and things like that. So it's a major, major, major issue going on. And, if you pop over to Reddit, you can kind of see some things from this article in particular. Okay. So here they tested a pink acai vape from Stizzy, the state's top selling cannabis brand. It carried more than 60 times the maximum amount of this pesticide, pymotrazine, allowed by federal regulators in cigarettes. So they're using cigarette comparison as the baseline here. But California doesn't require testing for that. So it's not in violation of anything, right? So the head of Stizzy comes on and says, look, we're adhering to all the state standards. We really haven't done anything wrong. We're being very strict in accordance with the standards of the state. But you can see some of the things here that pop up on this here, like Stizzy, Super Herb, Up Pineapple, Up Strawberry Cough. I don't know what other ones they tested, but it sounds like they did a bunch of different products on here. And they're showing you the chemicals that are popping up: incesticide, a reproductive toxin and carcinogen. Exposure to this one includes nausea, vomiting, headache, difficulty breathing, memory loss, right? Questionable development in reproductive toxin and endocrine disruption, right? These are really, really, really harsh things that we're talking about that people are consuming on a frequent and regular basis that's causing major, major problems. Look, I don't smoke weed anymore. I have no interest in smoking weed. My life is dedicated to running programs and making videos to help people quit, because pesticides aside, it was the addiction for me that was destroying my life. And in turn, of course, that had physical health, mental health, all those complications. So we're dedicated to making supplements and products designed to help people quit. Check out our Kick It Crave Less chewing gum. You can find it in the pinned comment linked below if you need help quitting cannabis. We have a full certificate of analysis on every batch saying exactly what we put into our chewing gum supplements. We go way above and beyond with that. Anyways, not to rant, But like, if it were me and I were to consume again, I'd either be growing my own if I could legally do so, or I'd be speaking to someone who legally grows their own. And I would want to know all the chemicals, all the pesticides, all the insecticides they're using, because at this exact moment, you can't trust this stuff. The regulations aren't set forth. And I don't think that we're ever going to catch up to what needs to be done. Now, you know, the saddest part, a lot of younger people I work with, a lot of adults that call me, they're aware of this. They're aware of the problems. They know it's a hot dog water cart, it's a pesticide cart, right? They know this. They're so addicted, though, they can't stop. They won't stop. So I think we also have to start investigating, is it just the higher THC concentration in comparison to CBD? Is it the different terpenes or whatever that they're using, or phytocannabinoid blends that they're coming up with? What is making this stuff so much more addicting? We need to be asking these questions, and we have to be having this conversation. This is not the first study, right? Back when all those people died just before COVID, I think it was CBS News or one of them, they did a major investigation and they found the same stuff. That was back in 2018, 2019. We're here in 2024 and nothing has changed. And I've been shouting it from the rooftops, making literally thousands of videos trying to help people quit, trying to spread awareness on this stuff. And until now, I feel like it's been kind of falling on deaf ears, but hopefully this creates some change. And look, I'm all for legalization. I'm all for declassifying marijuana. I think we should get it into the hands of people who want it recreationally, medically, and stuff like that. But we got to do something about this, because not talking about this, not doing things like this, it's creating more harm. Now, if you liked this video, stay tuned, because my company is in the process of testing some of the most popular cartridges found here in New York State. We should have this video produced sometime within the next 3 months or so. And we're going to talk about what we're seeing in the high schools, what we're seeing adults using, and we're going to get full panels. We're going to test up to 14 grams per product, per batch number, to do a complete test, to be fair to the products and the brands that we're testing, which I don't know if this study was done in accordance with that, because technically that's how it should be done, which is the only thing I could say in some of these brands' advantage. Maybe they just had a bad batch, right? Probably not, but I'll throw that out there. It's a possibility. So if you like this stuff, if you need help quitting, follow the channel, subscribe, check out our pinned comment, check out our supplements, check out our free PDFs on how to quit. I got you guys. Until next time.